Dun 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 dun. I've been playing a lot of FF7 Remake. Welcome to Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames. A very, very special episode. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Swaim, which rhymes with frame. And here's a co-host whose name rhymes with Schweppersman.
My name is Abe Epperson.
That's right. That's right. And I just had this thought right before we started talking officially on the record. We don't really rate frames either. No.
It just sounds nice.
Because I was going to tell our guests.
It's not a review show,
you
really.
don't. Yeah, I was going to tell our guest who hasn't been on
Sometimes.
this particular show. You don't have to feel the need to review it per se.
Oh,
it's
thank God.
Siskel and Ebert. It is not.
I guess I should say that it's just that if it were a review show, it's not a very good one.
That's true. Because
we don't have... like any plan or structure
or system.
For exactly.
Yeah. We don't rate
the
things
rating
out
of frames. All right.
Strawberries or whatever.
Whatever. Two thumbs up.
And that voice you heard is our very, very special guest, friend of the network, friend of Beans everywhere. Please introduce yourself.
Me, Vanessa Gritton.
Oh,
hey.
Yeah. So that's you've done Tales from the Pit and One-Upsmanship. Is that right, Ness?
I've done Tales from the Pit and One-Upsmanship, and
okay.
I'm actually pretty excited to do this one because I think I watch movies more than I do anything else, and also thank God it's not a review system because I feel like my scale is like, hell yeah, man, or I don't know about that one, man.
I don't know. If you like it, I'm not mad about it.
we just kind of on this program we just like to jazz, we just kind of run with it.
Yeah,
just wherever it goes, it kind of goes.
It's all about the scenes you didn't watch.
I think the secret sauce for Small Beans is we talk about whatever we want, but what we bring to the table is close reading. And close reading is not about saying whether something is good or bad. It's about being like, I saw this part and it made me think of this. So, let's unpack some shit.
What do you think of that? Yeah.
And the shit we're unpacking this time, of course, special shout out to the Flick Picker, because we have a Patreon tier, patreon.com/smallbeans, called Pick the Flick, where you, the audience, get a chance for the right price to tell us what to watch. And so far, y'all have had very excellent taste in that. I think 9 out of 10 times we're like, yes, that's worth covering. And I think this is worth covering because we haven't yet talked about a trippy time travel hard sci-fi story. And here's one. It's called, I was going to say All You Zombies, but it's called Predestination.
Yeah. Shout out to Charnstar. Charnstar, you're the Pick the Flicker. Thank you for the suggestion. And here's the episode.
That's right. Surname Star, first name Charn. Mm-hmm. So we like to start by asking our very special guests, in this case Vanessa Gritton, what they thought, and it's really a play it how you want to kind of game. You could synopsize the plot, or you could give your first blush impressions or what you're going to want to talk about, however you want to play it.
I think this is a really fun one to try and give a quick elevator pitch for what the plot is.
Nice. Okay, she has selected the hard mode setting. Go ahead. I was trying to give you an outworky where you could just go, I thought it was cool. But no.
Time travel.
Now I want a detailed synopsis.
Also, I had
yours.
the better option for how to watch this movie last night when I was tempted to watch it in VR and just go full time travel mode. And instead I watched this at 8 in the morning when I'm not really sure I was at peak understanding time. So, Predestination is a movie in which everyone is everyone. Every single person that you witness on the screen is the same person. It's basically, it could have very easily starred Keanu Reeves. I kept thinking that the entire time. It came out in 2014 when it was peak either Keanu or a Tom Cruise role. But in this case, we have Ethan Hawke. And it's basically that Futurama episode where Fry is his own grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And or the song I'm My Own Grandpa, which they use in it.
By Cat Stevens.
Cat Stevens. Except in this case, everyone is everyone. It's a one-man show. I don't know if it actually stopped anything or if it's just an Ouroboros. And lady.
You're black nurse in the nursery That's Ethan Hawke. Mr. Roberts, Ethan Hawke. All 12 babies, Ethan Hawke.
Every child she beats up in the
Ethan
orphanage, Ethan Hawke.
No, but most of the people are Ethan Hawke, yes.
Yeah.
80%
But they
of this
don't always
movie.
look like Ethan Hawke.
No, and who's the Sarah Snook, I think, is her?
Snook, yeah.
Has
And
she had a big
she's
career since then? Because she kills it
Yes.
as the other main Ethan Hawke.
She kills it in this, and also I saw this movie in like 2014 for the first time, and I was like, that is a good actress. And then I totally forgot about her. She is absolutely killing it on a TV show right now on HBO called Succession.
Yeah, she's really good
Yeah.
at Succession.
She plays Shiv, and so if you've seen that show, that's who that plays the role here. That's that.
And this is a movie I have wanted to watch for a long time because, like, I've broadcast very frequently through on all comms channels that Dark City is one of my personal favorite movies, and that I wish I was born in 1945 so my career could be short story sci-fi writer for magazines. And that's like where I would time travel to if I could. So people highly recommend anything that has a very solid, hard sci-fi premise to me.
Same.
And people have been telling me to watch this for like 3.5 years. So I'm glad we finally watched it.
You mentioned this one's was written by Heinlein.
Who I also...
All You Zombies. What else do we know about Heinlein?
Yeah, I'll do a little spiel about that. And Vanessa, please... jump in anytime you want, because Abe and I went through this before the call, but you haven't heard it. First of all, should be said, Heinlein would be a MAGA guy today, unless, I don't know, if another time paradox, if he were born at a different time, maybe his brain would have grown differently and he wouldn't, but
maybe he'd have experiences.
Yeah, but let's put it this way. Heinlein wrote Starship Troopers, and we've covered that, and Paul Verhoeven, if you listen to that episode, is rolling his eyes while he adapts it. He's saying, how stupid are these ideas? Heinlein didn't intend it as satire. Heinlein is would be like a homophobic, transphobic, MAGA type guy today with explicitly racist tendencies.
Oh yeah.
If he were as he was in the 50s. But he also wrote a bunch of sci-fi that's considered very seminal and important.
Like Stranger in a
It's
Strange Land.
It's hard. You hate saying this, but it's true.
You got your Philip K. Dix,
right?
And your Ray
Same
Bradburys.
with your whatever. Your Lovecraft is
I was gonna say
terrible
Lovecraft.
person as well. Yeah, piece of shit. Wrote some good stories.
Yeah,
So
sci-fi's really got no good sci-fi.
hey, Kurt Vonnegut was an angel.
Vonnegut.
Yeah, but this Predestination is based on a very famous short story called All You Zombies, which is a line in the movie as well, by Heinlein. And then we were looking into it on Wikipedia and found out Heinlein said that All You Zombies is basically a cleaned up version of By His Bootstraps, which is a short story from 1941. Also, fun note, he wrote All You Zombies in one day. Or claim to, or it's on Wikipedia. But By His Bootstraps is okay. I can get us onto a track where other people will get to talk, so that's what I'm going to choose to do. Let's put it this way: All You Zombies is basically cleaned up, but By His Bootstraps is like the super rough draft, and this is the reason I brought it up, sexist, weirdly dated 40s version of this idea. So By His Bootstraps is about a time-traveling mathematician who meets himself over and over, and the twist is the same. It turns out every character in the story is him, but there's all this extra random bullshit about his
time traveling to fuck, basically.
His home base, or his whole goal ultimately, is he finds out there's a time 30,000 years in the future where aliens came, turned humans into domesticated sex slaves, and then died of a plague. So he wants to go to that time and make himself king there and fuck everyone. So it's got all this weird 40s stuff in it.
Yeah.
But
it's let's build time travel to fuck with.
So then in 1959, he was like, you know what I should do? Write that story clean and good, simply.
Robert, do you think you're gonna keep in the parts where it's the fucking? Oh yeah, it needs the fucking.
Yeah. So, but I bring that up because I think Abe and I also noted that I love this premise and I love the twist, and people were right to recommend this to me because this is the exact kind of sci-fi shit that I super love.
Oh, hell yeah.
It is similar to Dark City. But this might be in the running for the worst movie we've covered on Frame Rate, which is going to upset some people hearing this. I hope not Charnstar, because I still think there's a tremendous amount of interesting stuff to talk about. But I would argue that the filmmakers adapting it did a really crappy, clumsy job.
I think...
and I want Vanessa
boring.
to give her impression of that.
Man, it's like... How do I get into this? Because I'm pretty much on like the same trail y'all are on, where it's like, there are pieces that I like. I do not like the sum of its parts. Because I love that concept. I love this kind of sci-fi. It should be so up my alley, and there is a really good performance here with Sarah Snook. I feel like whoever is adapting it, with a lot of adaptations, remakes, or anytime somebody takes source material, I feel like it's another one of those cases where they don't understand why the original works.
Yeah.
Can you, in some different form of words, what do you think works about the original? Like, how would you elucidate that?
Like, all right, how am I going to elucidate this? I think the thing that works about the original, because I like very briefly last night decided to get into All You Zombies, but I didn't read by the bootstraps, and my God, I feel like that was a significantly like bonier version.
Yeah.
But I liked the moments where it looks in terms of like person and personhood and like what makes you. And I didn't see it in the movie. I felt like it was more just, what if this was just a collection of cool things as opposed to like an actual exploration of like what makes personhood, what goes into that, what goes into making someone who, wow. Whew. Yeah, I've been in isolation for a while. I've been mostly talking to cats. What makes a person who they are? And
totally. Oh, yeah. It takes the question that a lot of movies cover, what is your identity? And breaks it arguably the most it could possibly be. Because most of those movies are like, what is my identity? If I'm not a nuclear physicist or like a good dad, it'll be a question on that scale. This is like, what if your gender is fluid, your memories are fluid, you're not sure whether you exist or don't exist? Like, how much can you not have an identity? Do you still have an identity is kind of the question, which is an awesome question.
It's a dope
very
question.
Interesting.
I actually just read a really interesting article about this a few days before we even like said we were going to cover this movie. I'm not sure if you guys have read it, but it was about a coder named Lee Holloway who had a very specific kind of front lobe dementia that essentially like strips away personhood and causes intense personality changes in like what your mood and temperament is normally like, right down to like what you're interested in on a fundamental level. And it was breaking down is who you are what your memories are, or is it the chain of events that lead to who you became, or is it something that could be so easily flipped by a switch that it's a lot more fragile than we think it is. So when I saw the concept for this movie, I was like, hell yeah, I've been exploring this topic for the last few days now, and I thought it was going to get into that more as opposed to just kind of like, hey, we made a crazy loop.
Well, it kind of... Go ahead, Abe.
Well, there's something that you said, Vanessa, that reminded me of like why I think you nailed it in terms of like you like all the topics that are assembled. But I remember recalling watching this movie, I thought it was from the get-go where it was just like, I got a story, like John says, I got a story, the best story you've ever heard. I was like, it's going to be one of these ones where we're going to like be doing flashbacks, and it's going to be, we're not going to get what that does as a format to me. Is it displaces my attention of the present, of like the urgency of moments, like let's say making a decision or having to deal with the decision being made for you, that you're intersex and now you are going to live as a man. Like that is a great scene where the doctor is supposed to be there talking, and it's done with this kind of just like carpet over everything. Just like, let's just give the details of what the story is, and then let the actor do her work in terms of like making that a big moment. But there's no intelligence or seems to be a crazy amount of thought into like, all right, now this is a film. How do we show in addition to tell, and I don't think that this movie does that often.
It has a lot more
It
tell.
really just gives you the information when you need it. Like it's a puzzle or a Rubik's Cube that once it's all lined up, the satisfaction is just in the colors all being on the same side. It's not about the story. It's not about the journey.
It's not about the elegance of the journey. Yeah, the journey. It's not about the journey. It's just going, as he says, this is all fine because everything you do gets you to your final destination. It's a movie that's so about the twist that it seems to broadcast, look, we're just explaining everything you need to know so that you can understand the twist. Just wait. It's going to be great. Just wait. And that's pretty boring. You have to be like, okay, I'll wait. And then the twist comes and you go, that was very good. That was a good twist. But the movie was kind of boring up to that point. And you had to tell stuff so it takes so much explaining. And a few points on that. So one is Heinlein's short story is no more elegant. So they had their work cut out for them.
Yeah.
And they're the Spierig brothers, German directors. Their other notable film is Daybreakers, which was, again, a movie that I think has a really cool twist on the vampire idea, but in execution it's like fine, it's good, but it doesn't like stick with you, but the premise is great. You can see why it's sold. And this is like that, and I think so is the original Heinlein story. So it's almost like they didn't drop the ball, because even the Heinlein story even more so, they even fixed some things in my opinion, or made them more elegant, I would say. So like in the movie, for example, the baby is left at the orphanage simply because they throw a spotlight on like the stigma of being intersex and the difficult, like Jane/John was unable, or, so the child ends up, you can't be single and have a child. And that all ties together and makes sense. You're like causally from a modern point of view, you're like, that's one loop that the time traveler didn't have to do themselves.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense that the baby would end up at an orphanage. In the original short story, they like the time traveler has to do a lot more work, like intentionally go to a time and kidnap the child, which I know was kidnapped out of the hospital in the movie, but you know what I mean. It's handled differently, where the time traveler, let's call him the barkeep, I would say in the short story, is even more laborious. Like he has to go, and I set this up, then I go 20 minutes later, I move this, I go 10 years in the past, I set this, and you're like, to make the premise work, you almost had to just recite an essay of like, this is like this is like this
recipe,
and ta-da.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a recipe. That's all it is. And a laundry list.
I think in some ways the filmmakers made it more elegant. In two very notable ways, I think they made it really inelegant. So I just want to point out the differences are they added the fact that at the end of the story, he goes into the future and finds out the Fizzle Bomber is also him. And they added the fact that traveling through time makes you have memory loss and psychosis, which is just a right around to make it possible that he could become the Fizzle Bomber and not remember his past. And then in the movie, they also added that his face is horribly burned, so he gets reconstructive surgery that just happens to make him look exactly like Ethan Hawke, a totally different person that's so different looking that they're unrecognizable to themselves.
And his vocal cords are damaged.
Yeah, and their vocal cords are damaged to give them a completely different voice, and they say, my mother wouldn't even recognize me. So it's like, I feel like the movie, in order to expand to fill feature-length time, they had to add 2 more plot beats, and to do that, they just did the same twist again. Like saying, doesn't it blow your mind that Jane is John, is the barkeep, is the baby? And you're like, yes. And then they're like, he's also the Fizzle Bomber. And you're like, okay, that's fine. He's also the bus driver. Okay, you're done. Like, that's the twist.
It's so much effort into the, I think I called it earlier, the fuckaboris, because it's like the snake that fucks itself.
It's like pulling a rabbit out of a hat and then pulling that rabbit out again, but this time he's wearing Groucho Marx glasses.
Yeah, exactly. You pull another rabbit out of that hat. Yeah. here's what bothers me, and you nailed it. Like you're talking about in the situation where he's like, I am a grandpa, or like there's this one setup that really, really bothers me, which is that Jane, being Jane, falling in love with John, seeing him naked, then later when is John, would look at his surgical scars and be like, I've seen these before.
Yes.
The only man I've ever had sex with
had them. That's true. A lot of fudging needs to be done, even more so than the short story, because the short story didn't try to accomplish as many things. All the short story did was someone can travel through time. They had a sex change in the middle of their lives. They travel in the future, impregnate themselves, and it's a closed loop. That's the twist. This adds, and they are the fizzle bomber in the future, and one other. They're like another person too. It like adds two more people that they are,
and I think that's
and so it has to like stretch further.
Well.
Yeah,
because like I get how you can watch the movie and not acknowledge that fact because it's just not brought up. There's no scenes about it. Why would they? But it does bother me because it's like, okay, so I'm not going to fault you for being like making a movie that's like a laundry list. There are diagrams online of this movie about the timeline
that are
and stuff like
trippy
that.
to look at, and we'll attach one to this on patreon.com/smallbeans.
And I really enjoyed like a movie like Primer for the same kind of educational, like, okay, this is cool. They're doing a lot of work here. But the second that you start saying like, now you need to look important, now it's important that the work is followed. And like, if you go back and watch it, it's all airtight. And look at what that magic trick we just pulled on you. But if they're making blatant errors left and right for the sake of that, that's where it falls apart. Because it's like, you just promised me that this would be like airtight. It's now not airtight. So what do you have remaining?
And the short story it's based on is specifically famous for being one of the most airtight time travel stories, which is a hard thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it just... I don't know. That just bothers me.
By the way,
it's like there's a promise.
Another one that's just as famous for the same reason, a Roswell That Ends Well, is considered among sci-fi buffs like a remarkably airtight time travel story.
Yeah,
It's very good.
Actually looking into this because time travel is both one of my like favorite subjects to look at when it comes to like pieces of media, but also the one that I have the least understanding when it comes to it. And I was asking people that actually like know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to talk of time travel, and they were all like, Futurama gets really close.
Nice. Yeah. I knew we'd end up talking about. Well, okay, so just straw poll. Vanessa, have you seen Primer and or Upstream Color?
I have seen Primer. I haven't seen Upstream Color. What is Upstream Color?
What about Annihilation?
I love Annihilation.
Yeah, so I feel like we're laying out a spectrum of, man, this is a great, thank you, Charnstar. It's a great one to talk about, even though we like shat on the execution. It's just there's so much to discuss. Because I knew we'd end up talking about Upstream Color is the second movie by the Primer guy. Equally complex, just with a bigger budget, like if you know what Primer feels like, it's like that, but different set of things, but it's an equally complex, like obtuse story. And it would take a crazy diagram to understand it. So but it's a balance, right? Because I feel like even for how complicated the concept is and how much they had to explain, and I'm almost on the movie itself, I swear, it is... You could easily watch Predestination and be smart and paying attention and not understand literally what happened. It wasn't even that clear. And I feel like Primer isn't clear, but when I finally sat down and cracked into it, it bore... Like, it was worth that study. Like, the more I dug in, the more it connected, like, perfectly mathematically, and the more I understood. Hereditary was like that. Right. I didn't like it because I didn't understand literally what happened, and I assumed it was a bunch of fudging and bullshit. Then when I realized, actually, everything is very well thought out and ties together. You just have to watch it again and again and again and read articles and shit. It made me super love it. And I feel the same way about Primer, Upstream Color, and Annihilation. Predestination, I feel like, doesn't earn it because it's unclear enough that I had to look into it to understand literally what happened. And then when I did understand it, I was like, that wasn't that hard to explain. You could have explained that more clearly than you did. Like,
and
this,
at least
yeah. Go ahead.
Given us like a little bit more like character and storytelling in between that, because there are like Annihilation is a really good example where upon rewatching it, yes, I get more from it, but also there's like performances, character, and storytelling that still make the stuff in between enjoyable, because you can't really just give people you can't really just vomit out formula and information and say there is a payoff and have that be enough. It's not the same as a short story where the reader can fill in these lines and like create these characters and these personalities in their heads. And I feel like Predestination didn't take a second to even really breathe in between and like weigh these consequences on these characters. Like we would see it sometimes with like Sarah Snook, and just she would take some extra time with a line and kind of repeat it to herself to like show what she might have been going through in that moment. But if I'm rewatching it again just to poke holes in it, I'm also not getting a ton of character in between.
No, it's a dry exercise. Yeah.
I'd say that if I had to watch it one more time, I probably like choose to turn it off after like the midway mark. As soon as the barkeep says, "What if I put him in front of you?"
Right.
And then
because
goes on a journey to do time travel. Like the thing that I think that the directors and the adaptation wants me to get to. Like the first part of the movie where she's telling the story is the most captivating part of the story. I know I talked about how it wasn't particularly well done, but the most interesting thing about the story is the main character's history.
Well, personally, I'd go one sequence past that. I did think the one structural thing I liked is that's the exact midpoint, and I get why they are like chirally symmetrical life stories. That's cool. The exact so it's like half the movie is getting to know Sarah Snook. Second half of the movie is quote unquote getting to know Ethan Hawke, but really just revealing and explaining the trick is the whole second half.
Everyone else, yeah.
But I would argue that the midpoint plus one sequence, because he says, like, I think this makes a great movie in and of itself. Guy comes and says, what if I could put you in front of the person who abandoned you, ruined your life? I do want to see the payoff, which is she realizes it's herself. And because this is not in the short story,
that's true.
Because Heinlein, so in the Heinlein story, because Heinlein absolutely is homophobic, transphobic, cisgender all the way, he was using intersex purely as a mathematical, like, oh, an intersex person is how I'm going to pull off my twist of someone impregnating themselves. I guarantee you he doesn't empathize. I mean, I've read the story. There's nothing about. He doesn't empathize with being born intersex or hermaphroditic or any situation like that. That's not really his interest. He's just getting like his nuts and bolts put together. So I think the one thing that I really appreciated that the Spirit Brothers did layer in is the actual empathy of going through a sex change against your consent because it's a backwards time, never having been examined before, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they pulled out what Jane is going through in a way that is not baked into the Heinlein original.
Yeah.
And yet dovetails so perfectly with, it was already about what is identity if you lose yourself in time? But they added like, no, but let's spend some good time meditating on that gender shit too, because that's actually more grounded in life experiences that real humans go through, is gender confusion. And I'm like, yes, that's a very good choice. And it sort of folds in with, which is really trendy right now, but great, like Invisible Man has an underlying social message. Get Out sort of kicked it off or popularized it. Like, genre fiction now has this underlying social theme, and I like that. I feel like we're in a Renaissance era of that, and I think that was, I wanted to give them props for like, good job focusing on Jane's reality as a human character, and that definitely for me became the most compelling. Like, I think that's why we would say, yeah, I'd rewatch the first half, because that little story of like getting the sex change and being an orphan and shit, that was real juicy human stuff. Yeah.
I wish they'd spent more time and effort with it. And I think it's once again because they they make it like it's a story. It's a game at the start. I'm telling you a story for a bottle of booze. You know, like
Right.
that's they force us to go through narration essentially, which can have its in and outs in terms of like, oh, and this is how I was feeling at this time. And we do see obviously clips of it all the throughout, but it's like it has to hop from place to place to place so fast that it's just like you can't sit in the scene.
You kind of get whiplash. I do super quickly want to shout out a sci-fi film like genre that got into also executing a social message a little bit earlier than Predestination. And that is A Scanner Darkly.
Good. Yeah, great movie. Yeah.
2006 movie that actually like way before a lot of other movies did actually had like genuine empathy for people dealing with the opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. I like sci-fi because of that, and I'm sure that that's why it works for you guys as well. It's always felt like because of the very strange and the unknown being the base premise of almost all those topics, it has strange bedfellows with the advances in progress. You know, that's why we see time and time again, even shows that are not, you know, like Asimov or, you know, a good example is Roddenberry, you know, like even though they're not necessarily progressive by any stretch of the imagination, definitely not now, you still have things like The First Interracial Kiss and stuff like that. Like you still have sci-fi is beloved, I think, by a lot of people because it is the first time that it says the world is strange. You're not that strange. You're just a part of this world.
Well, yeah, like
and that's a beautiful message. And that's, I don't know. I think I think they're doing service to that here. I wish they did more. It would make it better.
Well, yeah, like a fun bit of history. Sci-fi and horror have always been like my two favorite genres for like putting someone into the empathy seat against their will, because it kind of tells you here's a new and strange creature, and then you just realize it's like someone in the world that you don't really know what their experience like is. Like Rod Serling, everything he touched had I'm going to teach you what it's like to be someone else attached to it. Like before he even started Twilight Zone, he worked on a show. It was called The Great American Steel Hour, where basically it was like the American steel lobbies would like pay for these sci-fi writers to write short stories. And his short story, by pure coincidence, had a lot of similar story points that the Emmett Till case had.
Oh, wow. This is an even worse time to interrupt, but I'm sorry. Did you say Great American Steel Hour?
Great American Steel Hour.
Gash. Okay, that's all. Please tell us about Gash.
Yo, Rod Serling's been up in Gash for decades.
Exactly.
But that's going to kill me. But yeah, his story, by pure coincidence, had a lot of the similar cases as the Emmett Till story. And a lot of people were interviewing Serling and basically being like, did you do that on purpose? Did you do that on purpose? And finally, during an interview in which he was just chain smoking and annoyed, he was like, well, if the shoe fits. And it was from that point that he started being seen as a controversial sci-fi writer, and he wanted to like launch into the Twilight Zone and be able to do the same thing where he got to have these short stories that can tell different stories of different walks of life in a way that wasn't quite as ham-fisted, that made it easier for the viewer to think of empathy. And you see that in like Planet of the Apes, where it's
absolutely
making the oppressor feel like the oppressed. And it's always been a perfect genre for this.
It's so bizarre because you're absolutely right. It's so bizarre that like some of my favorite sci-fi, I think I've said on this program, I definitely said to Mike, Speaker for the Dead is one of my favorite.
Oh my god,
books.
That's one of the best things ever. And Orson Scott Card is a piece of shit too.
He's the worst.
That's what I don't understand. They're
They're all pieces of shit, you guys.
Why?
Yeah.
Because he writes one of the single most empathetic characters
Oh my God.
of all sci-fi time.
And it's about the very nature of like what empathy is. Like he fully understands empathy.
He understands it from all angles. It's not just why empathy is necessary. It's also like, what is it to be a killer and to work back from...
what is it to be the victim of killing? Like he sees it from all sides, and then you're like...
You're holding the key.
And then you're like, so
right
gay
now.
dudes can get married, right? And he's like, no, they'd go to hell. And you're
the
like, what?
fuck
You
outta
wrote
here.
this? What the fuck?
How? You literally are talking about these creatures that don't understand what death is, and they like become a tree and shit like that. And it's just like,
he's
oh,
like,
that's a
but
very
no
strange
wiener
thing.
to
We need
wiener,
to
though,
save them.
no.
This is life. This is life. We need to save them.
Yeah.
I need to speak for them. And it's just like, nope, no wiener to wiener.
Yeah, and in case you're not aware, I just think it's one of the most arresting stories of the civil rights struggle, so people should know. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy lynched in the 50s, like way too recently. So brutally mutilated and killed. Right, no one got in trouble. That his mother insisted on an open casket viewing, and like his horribly destroyed body is one of the many terrible American disgraces that will never be expunged for millions of years, like, and made a lot of people thankfully go, oh my God, what the fuck are we doing? And was it, so it's just, I didn't know that story about Serling. That's amazing that they're like, but are you trying to like call us out? Do you think we're racist? And he's like, yeah, man, I guess so. Yeah, everyone's super racist. Can I go home?
Do you feel attacked? Maybe it's because you did something.
Yeah, if you're this defensive about it, America.
The shoe fits. You fucking Cinderella.
And Abe, you mentioned Roddenberry. It should be noted, time travel paradoxes are all sown throughout, I think, for all of us, some of our favorite storytelling. There's a great Deep Space Nine, Trials and Tribulations, that is basically the predestination paradox. And there's a lot of stories. It's like it's a popular sci-fi thing to iterate on. Yeah.
Can we talk about how a lot of people make it seem like, am I wrong about this? Because I've voiced this opinion, and it usually either people agree with me or people just go like, I don't think so. But I haven't heard anyone say why I'm wrong.
Okay.
And I believe that if almost every single, like, Back to the Future, Terminator, you know, like you look at all these sci-fi time travel, Terminator, all these time travel stories, they're all only one problem, paradox, right? It's all the same paradox. It's just, whether you call it the bootstrap paradox or the grandfather paradox, it's a causal time loop. That's it, right?
Yeah.
That's the only.
So in case
there's only one problem in time travel. Am I
that's
wrong
what I was
about
going to
that?
say. Is I actually pulled it up and I was like, I gotta say this at some point, and now seems like the right time. Couple things. People constantly misuse the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" because, of course, it actually you can't. It's supposed to be that's an impossible thing to do.
It's a paradox.
That's why we do need to help each other when we're unemployed, because no one can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's not possible, you idiot. So anyway, and that's how Heinlein meant it. And his original story upon which this is based is where we get the popularity of using the phrase "by your bootstraps" in modern, like he popularized that term with that short story, which I didn't know. That's cool. But anyway, the classic example of this loop in the easiest way to understand it, so you don't need to see any of these shows or movies to get it. An example of a causal loop paradox involving information is as follows. Suppose a time traveler copies a mathematical proof from a textbook, then travels back in time to meet the mathematician who historically first discovered the proof, and simply allows the mathematician to learn the material from them having copied it. This information then has no origin. Like, we can't... The way we perceive time, you could not explain who actually thought of that. And that is, all these stories are just that. Then that thought experiment goes back hundreds of years. But all these stories are just that, but like replace information with a human identity or a piece of music. Like in the Star Trek episode, they go back and they teach Beethoven all the Beethoven music. So it's like, well, then, then who came up with it in the first place?
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Predestination is just, what if you were that? The piece of information is you, a human. Your physical DNA is the thing that no one can account for where it came from.
And it's all the causal loop. That's the only time that everyone goes, this is not airtight.
Man.
It's all that. And that doesn't bother me. It just, I don't know. People make it out to seem like it's complex. There's a lot of it, but it's not that complex.
I'd be so mad if I made me.
Well, I would say there are things that are very
I'd be disappointed.
simple. Well, that's another. It glosses over, like, Jen watched it with me and she was like, so he's just fucking himself? And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, and she was like, it's weird how they didn't even try to explain emotionally the process of, I think most people would be taken aback at the idea of, should I impregnate myself? Like, John didn't even question it. It was like, yeah, I'm going to fuck my 17-year-old self and impregnate myself. And you're like, really? That you're not even going to think about it? You're just going to go for it?
Yeah.
That would like give me pause.
0-60 right there. You just kick that up a notch. I was like,
she's like,
take me out for a nice
does
meal,
John not
or
consider
like keep talking?
Or well, her question was like, does John not consider that incest? Like, that idea grosses me out that I would do that. And I'm like, their movie's not gonna cover it. John's just gonna fucking go for it, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's also got this movie has the fighter fuck principle.
If you meet yourself
on,
through
right?
time, you either kill yourself
There's
or
only
fuck
2
yourself.
options.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's
Well,
it. That's
the
all
only
that happens
things
in this movie.
stories would do. And that's, I think something Vanessa said earlier just like really struck me of like, I think all these people writing serious dramas where they literally just tell you, like Green Book, like, hey, racism's bad. Being friends with other races feels good. That never convinces anyone. And yet that I am deeply convinced that storytelling is important, because storytelling is how we brainwash ourselves into whatever. Like, the human animal has changed over the generations. I believe that storytelling is how we put strings of programming into our brains. It's like how you hack a human brain and change what a human can be generations from now. Is the mimetic stories that prevail dictate how we think things are. But all these people writing stories where they're like, I'm telling you exactly what you should do. Dude, everyone's so defensive. That never changes anyone's mind. You know what changes someone's mind? A fucking horror comedy where the whole time you're just having a good time and you love the team that brought you this joy. And then at the end you go, you know, when you think about it, that crazy monster really just represented racism. That will make you genuinely lower your defenses and think more than any straightforward drama. And I just wanted to appreciate that Vanessa reminded me of that. Genre fiction is the best. It's better than straight fiction, in my opinion.
Transparency of story to imbue allegory and moralistic principles.
Well, because it's like genre storytelling does what most people in day-to-day I feel like can't figure out when they're trying to like quote unquote educate the masses, where they're only picking like $6 words and having like a very elitist worldview of like, this is why you're wrong and this is why you need to be different, and I'm going to speak to you from like a very I went to college kind of background, and it's more I want to be right than I want to make your life better. And genre storytelling is, I want to entertain you first. I want to tell a story that you want to tell too, because the stories that get told forever are the ones that you want to keep telling. And nobody ever tells a story where they're like, I was scolded into submission. It was, I went into something with a completely different idea. I was entertained. And then I realized in the middle of it that this was like taking me on the journey with it as opposed to beating me over the head with it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I always think about that because fantasy is another one, that keeps coming up with the writers that create such an imaginative world.
Oh, yeah. And do you know, and that's been like a bastion in a lot of ways of white supremacy for so long. But like the current hot shit top fantasy author, N.K. Jemisin, who's a woman of color, is doing like this whole series about the Broken Earth series that is like so fucking awesome, because if you've been steeped in fantasy your whole life, it's always based on Western European, like essentially King Arthur and Lord of the Rings with like shit and mush stuff. And I highly recommend N.K. Jemisin for like socially conscious high fantasy from a completely different worldview that has been completely underrepresented for the whole history of fantasy fiction.
I had no clue that was a
Good
thing.
shit.
I'll look at
Yeah,
it.
I think her series just won like the Hugo and Nebula and swept all the awards and shit, and it's super good.
Yeah, I've been hearing high recommendations because for the longest time, fantasy was like largely inaccessible to me for that reason. Because I liked horror, because I was like, well, there's a lot of horror where it's, you know, there's a final girl type character that I can at least try and like find some of myself in. But in fantasy, pretty much across the board for as long as I've been alive, it's been rare for me to look at it and be like, does anyone look like me here? Does anyone have any like anything that I can grab onto?
They all look like willowy Irishmen. Yeah.
And that author has been recommended to me for that reason.
Yeah, I've read 3 of the Broken Earths so far, and they're super good. Yeah.
I'll look that up. Yeah. Did you guys notice a few things? There's a few times in Predestination where I was like, oh, you're showing... I can't stop doing it when I watch a movie and I'm like, okay, so this is your bag of tricks. When they choose to obey the bag of tricks or not. For example, there's only one way in which they keep ways of not revealing information early. That one methodology they use is they obscure that thing in darkness or cut around it, which is like the simplest of all the formats.
That's what I meant about the fudging. Like when you have to just have a whole scene where we conspicuously don't see one of the people's faces, and then you have a scene right after it where someone's face is burned and they look at someone whose face you can't see and they seem surprised. You're like, okay, guys, something with the faces, all right? You can calm
Things
down.
happen.
Yeah.
And they so that's the obvious ones. There's also smaller obvious, like that's what makes me think they think that is a good trick because for example, they both have the same lighter. That's something I noticed.
Oh yeah, and
you
the
only
resonant
realize
lines
that later,
like
right?
like if only I were that. Like there's many, you know what I mean? There's many lines where he goes like, I made myself who I am today. And you're like, I get it. Wink, wink.
And then they just like, in order for you not to get that information earlier, the first time they use the lighter, the cut obscures the lighters, but it's like, but the people would see.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not taking the identity of the person who's telling the story. You're taking your identity as a director of the story. And I think that that's it's not the worst thing in the world, obviously, but it's, you know, it makes me detached from your movie a bit.
Yeah. And I think very notably, one of my favorite, like behind the scenes Hollywood stories is about a movie I still love. I think I'm allowed to. I'm not saying Kevin Spacey's great, but I still like The Usual Suspects very much. And there was at one point a shooting script for Usual Suspects where it was edited in a way that would have been very similar to Predestination as it stands, because it was originally going to be first, not flashbacks. It was going to be all the gangster shit happens all the way up to the midpoint, and the whole second half of the movie is Verbal Kent sitting in Detective Kuyan's office telling the whole story without flashbacks, like a 25-minute scene of Verbal Kent talking to Kuyan. And an editor famously, in most people's opinion, like saved the movie essentially by going, you should intercut the two halves of the movie. And they were like, yeah, we should. Great idea. That's way better.
Well, that would have been Bryan Singer, who's again
also a horrible person apparently.
But that's the thing that's amazing to me is that, like, look at what J.R.R. Tolkien did. Look at all the happiness he brought so many people. He guy's a piece of shit. You know, like, fuck that guy.
And not even as much as Singer, as far as Singer's like a sexual predator.
Yeah, Singer, I'm pretty sure. He's got
anyway, we're not
anyway.
Anyway. So maybe I'm not allowed to like Usual Suspects because that's a double whammy there. But
that's what I'm saying.
My point
is,
like,
seminal works can come from anywhere.
Of course. And it was interesting to see this movie because I think it proves that Usual Suspects team made the right creative decision. I was like, this is boring. They were right. Watching this, I was like, they were right. Like, this could have been intercut and it would have helped more.
Yeah,
and that's...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to cap it off by saying, and whether or not you supporting that work is like a personal choice. I encourage people to not support Bryan Singer personally, but whether or not that worked, I guess that, it was effective.
I haven't watched Usual Suspects in 10 years, but I think I can like it. Like, I'm allowed to have in my brain the memory of, I saw that. That was a good movie. That's fine.
Yeah, they can't take
that away from me.
I guess. What were you saying, Vanessa?
That actually leads me to two things. One, Usual Suspects is a really good example of like a really great twist in sci-fi where it's not entirely dependent on the twist for it to be good, and it's still good on rewatchability, because there are so many movies where it's so built on the twist that when you watch it again, you're like, I don't really need that. And like, I feel like Predestination is one of those where it like so strongly relies on, we blew your mind, that I can't really enjoy it again that I can with other movies that have like more fundamental buildup to the twist to where it's still enjoyable. And also in terms of like media made by monsters, my two favorite genres are sci-fi and horror. So I've had to like deal with the fact that most of the people that make the things that I like are monsters. And I think I've just hit this point where I'm like, man, your gods are dead, your masters are dead. Just use them as jumping off points to make better art.
Yep, yeah. And if you really need somebody, there's always John Carpenter, baby.
Man, he wants to do is chain smoke and play Destiny 2, and I love him for that.
Wait, is John Carpenter up on Destiny 2? He's
Yeah, he is.
He's a gamer now, dude. He's an epic fucking gamer.
I gotta watch him on Twitch. John Carpenter doing Vault of Glass? Are you kidding me?
He does not give a fuck. There's an interview with him where they ask him if he's gonna ever make a film or not. He's like, I don't know. You got a film I should make?
Yeah. Well, that's why I like Rick
like,
Moranis is finally coming back. And the whole time he was gone, people were like, so you quit Hollywood, right? And he's like, I don't know. Send me a script if it's good enough. I don't know. I'll do whatever I want at any time.
It's just standards, I'm old. Like I'll do it maybe. I don't know. Probably
he's
not.
coming back. I forget what for. But he did. Moranis recently signed a movie deal. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
He's so good. God, I miss him.
I remember because I cried and I tweeted
what a
about
treat.
it, but I forget what movie it's for. It might be a Honey I...
Because he doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah,
to
because
you.
he's coming back as Zelensky. I remember that. So it's a Honey I Shrunk the Kids new installment.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Probably a Disney Plus something, but I'll still watch it for him.
Whatever.
Anyway, speaking of hard sci-fi, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Yeah, I blew up the kid. That's what I want.
But I'm like, as we're talking, I'm going down a Wikipedia rabbit hole of famous time paradox thought experiments now, which are awesome. I like the Munchausen trilemma. I'm not going to waste their time with it, but I recommend people look it up. It's a thought experiment that proves it, explains and proves why nothing can ever be proven to be true. It's a very concrete explanation of why.
Ooh.
Truth is always out of our reach. You don't know shit about shit, and it's physically impossible that you ever will know anything about anything. I like that one.
You know what sci-fi story I've been thinking about like a bunch these quarantine days? There Will Come Soft Rains.
Oh, Bradbury, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the hook of that one? I've definitely read it.
Which one was
yeah.
that?
So There Will Come Soft Rains. There's also a really good Soviet cartoon that animates it. But There Will Come Soft Rains is basically a Ray Bradbury piece that the whole hook of it is when mankind inevitably destroys itself, whether it be by like bomb or war or madness, when mankind eventually like self-destructs, the only things that will exist after us is nature and whatever technology we left behind. And it won't give a shit. It's just going to keep going and it won't even notice that we're gone. And I've been thinking about it a bunch because I've been staring at out my window at a bird scooter that's being overtaken by weeds.
Yeah, because that's the one about the automatic house, and it just makes breakfast.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is day 8,500 of it making breakfast, and it doesn't care. And there's no human characters in the story, right? Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
And it wakes up the family, but it's just moving around a pile of ashes in the automated
right,
home.
and like the breakfast rots, and it cleans it, and it makes another breakfast. I like that one because it's so rare that you have a story that truly has no human character in it, because you know what I mean. a bug that is humanized is still a human character. Like, it's a truly characterless story,
Right.
which is hard to write.
It just says
It just
it's
describes
it reads like
objects
a haiku.
functioning. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
That's a great meditation on the time marches on kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one that I love is because it also another time loop. Okay, so what I'm getting into on Wikipedia is, and I realize every one has spawned multiple cool sci-fi stories. Basically, like any physicist's actual theory that they posit about, I think this is true of theoretical time travel. 10 sci-fi authors steal it and make it a story that uses it as a hook. So, like, one of my favorite thought experiments for time travel is called, I just had it up, the Novikov self-consistency principle, which is the theory of time travel that if time travel ever happens, we wouldn't ever know. Because if you follow me, I'm sorry, if you go back in the past, so of course, different time travel theories. Some people think there's infinite timelines, and some people think there's only one reality exists, and it is the reality that we perceive. This one assumes that reality is reality, and there's only one. If that's true, the question, the paradox is, well, if you go back in time and change stuff, what happens? Does it functionally change the future? And the answer, according to Novikov, was you would never know, because if you went back in the past and changed the time, those changes would instantly apply to the whole timeline. Therefore, that always would have been true, whatever you change. So, like, you could never have the Butterfly Effect movie where Ashton Kutcher is aware of, like, oh no, I changed the past and now everyone's dead. The horror. The neurons that physically compose your brain would have been born of a different timeline that always knew that everyone was dead or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, whatever is true always has been true, because you can't remove yourself from time. So in that, based on that hook, Steve Ditko and Stan Lee did a Marvel comic short story that I always think of and love, which is just scientists just invented time travel, and they're arguing about whether they can use it to even test the machine, because what could the ramifications could be so out of whack that they're like, one guy's like, we should just destroy it. I'm sorry we stumbled upon the secret of time travel, we should unlearn it. And the guy's like, no, I want to test it. And he's like, okay, we'll put a glass paperweight in the time machine and we'll send it back millions and millions of years so it can't fuck anything up, right? And he goes, okay. And they hit the button and it cuts back in time, and you see the very first, like, amphibious creature crawling from, it's just like a Simpsons joke, crawling from the sea onto land, and the glass ball appears intersecting with it, so it dies because, you know, they're like, the matter intersects.
It's like Q from
or it's
Star
like
Trek
Homer
next.
going, mustn't touch. And anyway, but the twist that The Simpsons doesn't do is it cuts back to the present time, and both the scientists are standing there with the time machine, and they're both lizard people now, and one of the lizard people says to the other one, see, I told you nothing would happen. And I'm like, that's a good ending.
That is so great. Yeah, you guys seen Time Cop?
Yeah, as of Friday, we watched it for Gamefully Unemployed. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just so many holes with that. He's got, like, guy who's in charge of time cops, the time cop captain, the time captain in that movie has one point where he's like, whoa, what's going on? Why is that? And why is that changed? And he's like, you just came back from time. What do you mean? Why is that changed? It's always been that way. And, like, the captain of the time force is so woefully unprepared for the idea that, like, something has changed and just doesn't do it. The other thing is that movie ends with if one person touches another version of themselves, they, like, explode or whatever, or turn to goo. But how do you rectify that with the fact that, like, every 5 years, every few years, all of your cells have completely changed.
Wait,
you know?
yeah. I remember seeing that in
what-
Doctor Who too, and I'm like, there has to be enough time in between to where it's not even the same person.
And where's that line? What's the difference between then and now? You know, like, is it 1% changed? Is that now a different cell? Does that happen in seconds? Like, it's all bullshit. It's all just stupid bullshit, but whatever. I do like that Predestination doesn't have any of those wonky kind of like time travel rules. They have
you can't travel more than 55 years from the date time travel was invented, and they have that the more you jump, the more crazy you get and more gaps there are in your memory.
Yeah,
I would argue that's kind of a lot of stupid time travel rules.
There's one line that jumped out at me that is Ethan Hawke when he's describing the time device that's like a violin box essentially. He says like it's got no moving parts.
Oh yeah, that was interesting.
Do you remember that line? And I was like, why the fuck does that matter?
I don't know.
Why did we need to know that? Other than maybe it's just like a solid rock that's like, yeah, I guess if we just put it in a violin case and set the time, it works.
I never explain what time travel is. That would be funny if he's like, no moving parts. How'd you invent time travel?
No moving parts.
I'll be honest with you. We found a rock that's a time machine and we put it in this case.
We just put it in these violins.
We really lucked out on this one.
Because that reminded me of like a preemptive thing that they're gonna do later for like the whole like why do Terminators have to have skin thing that Terminator does that's real stupid, you know, like it's gotta have some skin on it, baby. Like
but
that's how time travel
works.
works.
It's whatever.
Yeah, but clothes don't go. Okay, so like cotton.
No cotton. Yes, okay.
Yes,
why?
leather.
I don't know. I wanted to see Schwarzenegger hang dong, man. Have you seen him? He's a beefcake, dude.
Yeah, that's...
Let me have this.
Yeah, come on, baby. Yeah. That seems to be the motivation for most things. I mean, let's all agree that Heinlein was thirsty as fuck. That's very clear to me after he's written what he's written.
Upon reading this last night and then this now, and I haven't actually read Stranger in a Strange Land, but now I'm just kind of like, how much of Heinlein is stupping?
Stranger in a Strange Land, very much of it actually. Stranger in a Strange Land, I read very young, and because one of my cardinal character attributes is empathy, I just have a lot of it, and it was nurtured in my childhood. That book really appealed to me because at its core, it's him examining like the hippie movement as it was happening. So it asks questions like, why can't we all just get along? You know, if everyone just refused to fight wars, there wouldn't be horror and pain. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, it asks questions like, couldn't we just all stop being dicks and everything would be great? And when you're young, these things are very, like, if you are an empathetic person, feel so intoxicating. Like, I really identified as a hippie, as a stranger in a strange land hippie, as someone who was like that. And I bring this up because I just want to warn people who might be reading that book. It also very much goes into Heinlein projects that, like, in a perfect future society, basically Valentine Michael Smith, the Martian, teaches free love as well, because that was part of the hippie movement. And the society on Earth gets to a point in that book where people fuck each other in any combination on anywhere in the gender spectrum just to say hi, just because it makes each other feel good. It posits a world where jealousy doesn't exist. So, like, people live in big orgy clusters and they just, you know, everyone's pansexual. And as a child who believed in openness, just love always beats hate, and like the more you love, the better, that book is the reason that I thought an open poly relationship would work. And I would say I wasted a decade of my life in a nightmarish relationship where we were both trying to get an open relationship to work. And I blame that book. It like stole 10 years of my life from me. Like, my girlfriend at the time was the one who said, I think we should try an open thing. And that book is the reason I was like, well, it worked in Stranger in a Strange Land. Yeah, let's try it. 10 years of horror, 10 years of jealousy and like recrimination and weird feelings. Oh, terrible, great book.
I've been Michael Swaim's friend for more than that decade, and I'll say about him, the man fucking loves books. It's
true.
He will not disagree with books.
Cardinal truth about Michael Swain.
Yeah.
The man
Oh,
loves
that is
books.
true. I tend to.
He has
It's
to
true.
listen to books.
I have a strong
He has to.
authoritarian. Like, I'm a sheep. Like, for so many years, because it was in a book, I'm like, I don't know. Robert Heinlein wrote this in a book. It got published. It must be true. I should live my life by it.
Typed and everything.
Or I just felt like,
Typed.
why can't I be as open and loving as this fictional character who was a Martian?
Right.
Shouldn't this all be fine? And you're like,
Because
because it was a book written by a racist
No.
misogynist in the 40s, dude. It has nothing to do with your life
Right.
experience.
But the underlying epistemology of that, though, is very interesting to me because it's like authoritative is an interesting word, and you're not alone in that respect. Stories are so desirable. They're just delicious for our brains. And so when we're on the high of that, like, you will listen to things. You will see things in the way that, like, the design or the director or the writer is authoring things to a purpose.
Yeah.
You're following along with their thought process, not your own, which is part of the escapism that
Yeah.
is books. So in terms of epistemology, like, it is, of course, a wonderfully effective methodology for
Especially
dispensing
if you're
knowledge.
reaching young
But it's
people.
also dangerous.
You know, I was young at the time. Identity's still being formed. Like, if you're just an adult who can write in a confident tone, I think a lot of like kids and tweens will be like, I don't know, this Robert Heinlein seems like he knows what he's talking about. You know what I mean? Like, we're all looking for a book
Right.
that would take. I truly believe that life is a bunch of random nonsense, and we all would love the story of all stories that actually is true and tells us what to do, so we don't have to just constantly make our best guess in a chaotic environment. And that's what religion is. Spoiler.
I was gonna say,
It's a highly mimetic story that people falsely think will explain what the twist is. In my humble opinion, the twist is, this is a bunch of random shit that you will never comprehend. The end. But but stories are cool because they fakely make it seem like there's hope of understanding one thing, but there isn't really.
No, they're liars. They're big liars. I'm reading this book called The Beginning of Infinity that talks about why creativity involved in humans, and this book spends an exorbitant amount of time on the nature of
Oh
memes.
yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, I know, but like, come on, man. Like, you're a physicist and you're just you're writing about
But
memes.
true though, dude. Well,
It's
one
like,
of my
this is
favorite
weird.
sci-fi books, always and forever, is Snow Crash,
But
because
it's true.
it taught me a truth that I can never unsee that affects everything about everything, which is that consciousness is language. We could not conceive of our own identities or be conscious without language. Our brains are meat computers, and language is a fancy trick that we animals learn to do to self-program our own meat computers. Language and everything we do is just programming the computer that is inside your skull. And like a computer and like programming, you can be hacked. Being hacked is someone saying a sequence of words that changes your mind about something. You just got hacked, motherfucker, into changing your behavior pattern. And you can hack yourself proactively. That's what we call therapy and self-actualization. Or you can drift through life being randomly hacked by shit you read or things that people feed into your ears. It's awesome.
It's awesome, and it's
and
unending.
it's mimetic.
That's the
what
other
memes
thing.
are.
Not-
Is your brain gets hacked and it
Yeah.
self-replicates. You say that string of programming to another human, and you spread whatever the thought is. It's good shit.
and then fucking racists.
Oh
get
yeah,
it.
racism.
And they
is,
ruin it.
racism as a concept is one of the most successful human memes, which is sad but true. Yeah.
yeah.
That's why.
Because
Well,
our brains
I-
organized by color. It's like there's
Yeah.
no reason. I mean, it's totally illogical. It's just a fucking side effect of how our brains are limited.
Like, I keep wanting to fight for humanity in this story that we're crafting here.
They're hard
And
to
every
stick
single
up for.
time, it's just like you got.
Yeah, they are.
It's like, yeah, for every one of those, you also have a Ray Bradbury. I'm like, God
That's
damn
true.
it, forgot about.
But I would
Ray
argue
Bradbury.
that by the same token, humans, like all of the universe and like all of nature, we're neutral at worst because we're just doing what our brains tell us to do, and we didn't ask for our brains to come into existence. Just blame the universe. The universe is an entity, and it's doing whatever it's going to do. You're just on, like, the train tracks, you know? I don't know. Don't beat yourself up too much.
Now I have a reason to go outside and shake my fist at this guy.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so we'll wrap up with, because I was able to read the Munchausen trilemma in its basicness here while we talk. So that is to say, I think this will put a coda on everything. Think about this. Let's say you want to know anything, or assert that anything at all is true, that you know it.
Yeah.
You either have to...
I got it in my head.
Okay, let's
right
say
now.
you want to prove that matter exists. The desk I'm sitting in front of, I want to prove it exists. It's an infinite regression that can never be proven, is one, because I prove it exists because I touch it. Okay, now we have to investigate how touch works, neural receptors. Now we have to investigate how we know neural receptors exist. Okay, now my brain, because I see it. Okay, now we have to investigate how ocular cavities work. Well, why do you see it? Because of light? Now you have to explain light. In other words, every aspect of the universe can only be proven with a totality of information about every other aspect of the whole universe, which is what Devs is about. Side note. And then...
Yeah, is this just the coastline
This
length
is
problem?
I don't know. It's called, at least on Wikipedia, it's called the Munchausen trilemma. So that's the first dilemma. The second part is, okay, smarty pants, what about circular logic? I can say the sky is blue because blue is the word that I randomly assign to that, the color of the sky. That proves itself. And they say, okay, but that doesn't actually provide information, because if something's reliant on itself, it's a circle and can't expand. So you have no tool by which to actually expand your knowledge of what the fuck any of this is. And then the third part of the trilemma is, you can stop at self-evidence or common sense, like say, look, dude, I'm just going to navigate the universe because it appears to me that the sky is blue, and I don't care. I'm just going to accept that a priori. And they say, okay, then you have abandoned the idea that there is a verifiable truth. You are just utilitarian and saying, I'll do whatever I perceive to seem to be a good idea at the time. Therefore, all approaches to life that you could conceivably take are wrong. The only thing that's true is it is what it is, and no one knows what we mean by that. Life is nothing and unknowable. The end.
Yeah, I mean, 2 and 3 are just behavioral. That can be excused, and I know what they're saying there. I just don't think that's enough of a warrant for what they're saying. I don't think that the world is undone.
I think the first one proves that it is.
There is a determinism.
Like, we could never... It's just saying that, well, whatever. You don't have to believe what...
I think I'm comforted by
I was
that.
going to say, that resonates with my lived experience. I think it's true that the universe is unknowable to humans, certainly. Like, it's beyond our scope of understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Everything seems random
that
to me,
I'd agree with.
Which is funny because predeterminism, which this film is about, seems to imply a lack of randomness. But I would argue that from my lived experience, even if it was predestined or not, I'm just saying my lived experience is I never know what's going to happen next. Something random. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably going to go watch the last episode of Devs. That's my predetermination right there.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go start Devs.
Yeah, Devs is pretty cool.
It's good.
I don't know why it's becoming a plug for Devs, but it's pretty cool.
Oh, wait, no, I'm not.
He did gauge it down a couple notches for TV. Like, it's not as hard to figure out as other Alex Garland stuff, but it's almost as interesting. I would say it's like Annihilation with training wheels on, but it's still very good.
I was saying the exact same thing to someone else. That's
where he's like, look, it's TV. I'll
okay.
explain it really clearly.
Yeah, all right, so TV has to do this stuff. Like, it can't ask as many questions.
It can ask them, but it can't not
answers.
answer them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I like that it's not a box of question. What the mystery box, the J.J. Abrams.
No, it's not that.
Definitely not that. I like how it's like you think in the one episode it's going to be like, oh, is this going to be like a fucking Lost thing where they have 3 toes and they never explain it? No, they do big things like what is Devs, and then they go, And here's your answer in episode 2.
And I thought
This is what
they
it is.
almost like for my taste, who likes challenging fiction, too far. Like that scene where she's like, "Devs is this. That's what devs is. You asked what devs is. It's this." And I'm like, you said it. We get what devs is.
Got it. Right. Well, I
That's
think
how
that's
TV
kind of
works.
Like,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
you want, right?
Yeah.
That's what you want. Yeah. Because people have not gotten it for so long. Because
The
of,
average sophistication
Damon
of
Lindelof
humans. Yeah, it's not super high.
I think I'm gonna watch it after. I just started for the fourth or fifth rewatch, but my boyfriend's first watch of Neon Genesis, and that's gonna be a fun one when he gets to the ending, and I'm gonna have to figure out how the hell I'm gonna explain it.
I've
seen it 5 times.
I
So
haven't
you've seen
seen
Neon
it, no.
Genesis? I can't get over how fucking thirsty that
All right,
is.
not only is it really thirsty,
That is-
but like as someone that has been watching it since they were like 16 several times, every translation, every dubbing, anytime I watch it with someone, we get to the ending, they're like, "Oh, maybe you can explain it because you've seen it so many times over," and I'm like, "I've been trying for a decade and a half." It's real thirsty,
Yeah.
but
But man, it is cool.
It's
It
cool
is
as hell.
really cool. I mean, they're not
Is
wrong.
it?
It's not. They're not wrong when they're like. They're basically. You remember Pacific Rim? This is like what
Is it-
inspired that.
Really? That wasn't inspired by Transformers and Godzilla?
no, big time Pacific Rim.
I mean,
big time Neon
time.
Genesis. Like specifically.
I hear both from credible nerds. Is it Evangelion or Evangelion?
In the actual show, like on the both English dubs, they say Evangelion.
Okay.
But they usually abbreviate it for like Ava most of the time. So I think you only hear it like 10, 15 times throughout the show in its entirety.
Gotcha.
But like the main things that inspired Pacific Rim was the idea of it being like a government entity that happened because of like this national disaster and the way it like transforms people's lives, but also the way they like sync up to the robots, because it's this idea of like if it was as accurate and organic as a person is, and that directly came from Neon Genesis. But it's a robot show that like both pays homage to and sometimes satirizes, but in a way that takes itself a lot more seriously than that, the genre in of itself.
Yeah, because giant robots go way back. There's like that black
It
and
goes
white
way
one.
back.
There was like a black and white giant mech Japanese cartoon before color film even, I think. Yeah.
I almost describe it as like Knives Out or something that's like completely its own movie while completely paying homage to the genre that came before it. But then it also gets
Right.
into like, what is humanity? What is human instrumentality? Who are you? Are you your actions? And it gets real. Who are we? Why are we here? And do we even exist on our own, or are we just a collection of beings as humanity altogether?
Yeah, the collectivism of it is, kind of streamlined by the what's the name of the creature they're based on, or whatever, the thing inside the Avas that they're driving, whatever that
The
is.
angels?
The angels, yeah. Like they seem to have like a group consciousness of something.
Yeah, where it's like,
Or-
is everything just one group brain? Or are we all just collections of hives?
which is kind of similar to the kaiju.
What is this
Pacific Rim,
podcast becoming?
because
What the fuck are you guys
don't
talking
know.
about?
it's interesting. It's
Oh, I know.
interesting.
We're just several
You've
steps
seen
away
these
from
things. You know what we're talking
predestination. That's all. Yeah.
That's true, but it's an interesting. I
yeah.
like the conversation. It's fine to like it. It's fine. So yeah, we'll talk about this off the
Off pod.
podcast then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You should maybe check it out. I just can't get through all the scenes of little boys who are like, "I'm gonna see a girl's titties." It's just.
Well,
it's
even
one
I
after
mean, I
another of
started
these
with the
scenes.
FF7 remake battle victory music, which I'm playing right now, and titties a poppin'. FF7 remake reminds you how thirsty
Yeah.
FF7 actually
It's-
was. I forgot the
Yeah,
aspect
yeah.
of like, who's he gonna hook up with? Tifa or Aerith? Oh, whoever he picks, it's gonna be hot.
Oh yeah, yeah. In this one, it was like, oh, but Jesse's here now too.
Wants
It's
that
like,
dick too.
fuck.
Oh, dude, we're gonna be clad busting up
damn.
in here.
Actually, the Cloud Buster.
Well, it's just called the Buster. I'm conflating it
later.
intentionally with the Kate
The
Bush song
Buster
Cloud
sword,
Busting
yeah.
to make a joke about Cloud Strife's semen coming out. That's how that all
Yes,
looped together.
Hell yeah, dog.
I'm Cloud and I'm
That's that old
busting.
chestnut.
Where's that gash? Where's the Great
the
American
gash?
Steel Hour when you need it?
So Sci-Fi is made by Thirsty Monsters, and
Sci-fi is thirsty.
we eat
Yeah,
that
and
shit up.
Oh, and as ever, repressed transphobic assholes are also secretly super thirsty. Like all these old sci-fi authors who are like, I just believe that a man and a woman is what God blah blah blah. They're always writing stories where they're like, then his fourth dick grew and he fucked his own vagina.
dude.
Like they're always
it's because writers, man, writers are horny as hell.
no, it's because repression. Just don't repress. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well,
do whatever you want. Tell him Mike sent you.
Thank you, Charnstar, for this
Thanks,
conversation.
Yeah.
Charnstar. And thank you even more, Vanessa.
Yeah, do you want to plug
Um,
your pluggables or anything like that?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I
Oh,
know
yeah, it
Night
was a
Church
blast.
is still going, right?
Yeah,
Or
Night
are
Church
you
is
guys... Okay, good.
they're
You guys quarantined?
still going to meet, like, all of us are quarantined individually, but we're basically just like working on individual projects and uploading it together.
Cool.
In terms of like stuff I've been working on that you can check out now, I have a new article up on Fangoria on the life of Alexander McQueen, and I have some other articles coming out too that I'm pretty excited about. And if you have a cable package that includes El Rey Network, I host a show called El Rey Nation where we talk about pop culture. It's on every Wednesday, but you can also download episodes on Amazon and iTunes. And please do. I'd love another season because they do things like let me talk about kaiju for an entire episode. And networks like, that's cool. So would love to be given money to just talk about giant robots for an hour.
Yeah. What a great
All right.
gig.
For King.
right.
You're the Queen of Kings.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a sitcom, maybe.
Ooh, Queen of Kings?
All right.
Yeah. You and Jerry Stiller?
Oh man, where he's
In the
just my
Bronx?
husband and he yells at me.
I guess they were in Queens. I don't know why All right. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, aren't you thinking Kevin?
But wasn't
what's
Jerry
his name?
Stiller his dad in that?
I don't know.
In King of Queens? I think it was,
Was
Jerry
it?
Stiller.
Maybe.
Yeah, because no. The only other, because
Serenity now.
fucking Everybody Loves Raymond was Young Frankenstein, not Jerry Stiller's
Right,
definitely
right,
King
right,
of
right,
Queens.
right.
Was dad
Yeah.
on King of Queens?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want some of
haven't
this?
seen enough.
You got it.
You got it.
Freeze frame. End of frame rate. We're out. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.